Hey everybody, welcome to the Dad Challenge podcast. My name is Josh and you are here for Ministry Monday. I didn't do one last week because I was lazy. But this week I've got one that I'm pretty pumped about because I've been kind of studying this my whole life. I've been in tune with it. I might not know everything about it. Obviously, there's a lot to dig into here. But today we're talking about prosperity gospels and prosperity preachers in general. Now, some of these can be convoluted and gray. Some of the pastors I'm going to talk about today, and I'm not going to cover all of them. So buckle up, because this one gets a little bit crazy. It gets a little bit infuriating too, because what bugs me the most about prosperity preaching and gospel is that it's predatory. And if you know anything about me, I hate when people exploit other people for their own gains, obviously. Prosperity gospel is basically just that. It preys on easily influenced people to take their money, put it in their pockets, and then justify their life and lavish lifestyle and jets and airplanes and houses and mansions and yachts and everything by saying God wants them to have it. And today we're going to dig right into what they're talking about. How truthful is it? Is there any truth to it, biblically or otherwise? And then talk about like the psychology behind it and why people fall for this bullshit and how dangerous it is actually for the real church, for the up and coming church that's happening right now. Like the Great Awakening is happening, I believe, where people are falling away from the regular old traditional sense of church and they're starting to understand their faith on a personal level, which likely won't include these giant astronomical buildings and pastors and preachers with white teeth and gold underwear and wives sleeping with pool boys and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to dig into this a little bit today. So what is the prosperity gospel? The prosperity gospel is basically a gospel where pastors and preachers will use the gospel and the Bible, specifically a lot of the Old Testament, to justify being wealthy and healthy. And if you're not wealthy and healthy, there's a problem. There's a disconnect. And God wants you to be wealthy. He wants you to be healthy. He wants you to be astronomically rich. He promised those things to you. And this is how you're going to get them, by listening to these jackwagons preach on their massive TV networks, throwing them as much money as you can, because by giving them money, you're actually helping yourself. I know. And I hesitate to say this because some people are truly suckered into this and they don't know. It preys on the weak-minded, similar to MLM schemes and all that stuff. So prosperity churches don't exist without dumb people. Okay? So if you go to one of these churches, I apologize for saying that. Not really, but leave the church. Like, be smart and move. So let's get into it. I'm going to play a little bit of heist music because these guys are literally heisting the world right now. So here comes the music. We're going to talk about who the major players are in this thing. So who are the players? Well, you got Benny the Hun Hin, okay? This guy is a jackass. He's one of the greatest televangelists in the world, meaning he makes the most money, okay? And if you have never seen American Gospel, go watch it because his nephew, Costi Hin, calls him out in the lifestyle that they led. He admits to living the lavish lifestyle, and his whole family, they have $10 million mansions and Bentleys and everything else. We're going to get to why that's a problem later, okay? You got Joel the Ass Osteen, okay, who is one of the greatest wolves in sheep clothing because he comes across the most genuine. He's the nicest guy. People seem to really like him. He's very engaging, but he is one of the most dangerous prosperity gospel preachers in the world, and he is literally the scariest person to me. So that should say something, okay? You got Kenneth the Snake Copeland. This guy is just an idiot. And everybody hates this guy, but he is literally unapologetically evil out in the world and just covering it up by saying he's a follower of Jesus. But this guy is evil, okay? TD Jakes the Fake, who made tons, I think $150 million. He owns his own network of television and everything. He built it on the backs of his congregation, of his church. Hey, you got Joyce the Joker Meyer. It's funny because she's one of the most prolific preachers in the world. She still makes the least money. So if you don't think there's a wealth disparity between men and women, here's your proof. But Joyce the Joker Meyer, she's very, very good at engaging at speaking, and she's another wolf in sheep's clothing where it seems like she's genuine when she comes across, but her lifestyle seems to counter that. You got Jesse Duplantis, who is a groper and who went on TV, and I'll show you in a minute, about begging for another jet. And you got the aptly named Creflo Dollar, who I'm not even sure this is his real name, but it probably is. And then you got Stephen the Juicer Furtick. And these are just some, okay, of like 50, 60 major influential pastors in there. But you got Stephen the Juicer Furtick, and he is a guy who might not necessarily, you would consider him a wealth and prosperity preacher, but he's going to land on this list because of the way he lives his life. And the way that a lot of these preachers, that might be another video too, where we're going to talk about preachers who live these lavish lifestyles, who may not necessarily talk about wealth and gospel, but then how do they justify their wealth and life, right? So we're going to get into that. That's the players. And that's our team of heisters, okay? So if we're gonna go rip off the world of hundreds of millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, this is the team you want. They are elite. They know what they are doing. They're great communicators. They have incredible teams behind them, and they make millions by fleecing their flocks, okay? They bring their sheep up to fleece them for their wool. That's all they're here for, okay? And so let's get into it. I'm not going to be able to cover all this because I don't have time. Like, I'm going to have to do a whole 10-part series just on wealth and prosperity preachers. Joel Osteen is worth a reported $100 million. He has this house, and he flies this airplane, okay? We're going to talk about that in a minute, about airplanes and mansions, okay? And he's probably likely got tons of investments and major investments that we have no idea about underneath his umbrella corporations and all that stuff. So he's wealthy. Very, very, very wealthy. A lot of these pastors have more money than they'll ever be able to spend in their entire lives. Like, literally could not physically spend the money they have. Like, what else could you buy, right? Yachts, cars, everything's done. The thing is, when you get this wealthy, there's no way that you can be pure. And that's gonna be my argument today. You got Kenneth Copeland's worth $150 million. I think he's been preaching for 40 years. And he believes he needs a plane because he doesn't want to sit on a plane with demons. Okay, so watch this video.
How are you, sir? We'd just like to ask you about why you don't want to fly commercial. Why have you said that you won't fly commercial?
First of all, can we stop there and look at this guy in the eyes? Look at that guy right there and tell me you think that this guy's a man of God. Look, I know this sounds creepy, but my gut tells me that this guy is literally the devil. Look at his eyes. You tell me that you don't think Kenneth Copeland is evil? I'm sorry. Just by looking at this guy getting out of his $100,000 car from his giant ass airplane and looking at his eyes, you tell me you don't see pure evil in this guy's eyes. Like, this guy is creepy.
Said that it's like getting into a tube with a bunch of demons. Why do you
His driver's like, please get in, please get in, please get in, don't talk to this girl. His driver's like, and then Kenneth with his tiny hands is about to, let's hear what he has to say.
think that?
No, listen to me just a second. Not the people. The main reason is because of the need. If I flew commercial, I'd have to stop 65% of what I'm doing.
Oh. What the do you do, dude? You don't do shit. So yeah, you should have to stop 65. Well, you tell me what you do and maybe we'll discuss it.
That's really the main.
Isn't it true that you want to fly commercial so that you can fly in luxury? How much money did you pay for?
As he puts his Ray-Bans on.
Pay for Tyler Perry's Gulfstream jet, for example.
Well, for example, that's really none of your business. But
Isn't it the business of your donors?
listen,
I love it because it is our business. You run a nonprofit corporation, okay? A nonprofit meaning that you have to be above board with your numbers. Remember that video we're going to talk about where I'm going to pay an accountant, or hopefully one of you guys might be an accountant, to talk about how churches hide this, how they justify this stuff. They have so much money, they have to spend it. And so this is what they do. They buy jets.
It's the business of your donors.
listen. I paid.
Look at his eyes. Look at his eyes. This guy. Look, I'm not sure I believe in, like, people being, like, you know, embodied by demons. But if there is ever proof for being embodied by demons, this is your guy right here. He's so cornered. I love
You
it.
kind of caught me off guard here.
You
okay?
think?
Well, if you like to come out here, I'd like to give you a chance to catch your breath and have a conversation. We don't want to catch you off guard.
I love Inside Edition. You got to get this now. Hey, you listening to me? My wife thinks Inside Edition is, oh yeah. Now, thank you, Lord. Help me. Let me pray.
Well, let me just ask you a really simple question. A lot of people think it's unbecoming for a preacher to live a life of luxury and to fly around in private jets. What's your response to that?
Very simple. It takes a lot of money to do what we do. We have brought over 100, let's see.
He doesn't even know his own numbers.
The latest figures just came out. 122 million people to the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah. No, you haven't. That's bullshit. Then we'll talk about church metrics in another video.
Let me give you another example. Last May, I was scheduled
Oh, his smile. He's a snake.
for Lagos, Nigeria. That's a long ways. I had a week off, and I was scheduled for Peru. And I prayed about it, and I thought, I'm not missing that dedication in Jerusalem.
Who is this guy? How does he have people following him? He can't string a sentence together. Oh my gosh. I don't understand how this guy is where he is. He must be really, really engaging. This guy's definitely a crackhead too, as well. Easily, he's on something for sure. Like, this guy is a snake. If you don't see that right from this interview, this is probably one of the most eye-opening interviews I've ever seen, and it's just she caught him off guard and he kept talking and he shouldn't have, but he did, and I'm glad he did.
Without the airplane that we have that I bought from Tyler Perry, and I didn't pay anywhere. Tyler's one of the greatest guys. He made that airplane so cheap for me, I couldn't help but buy it.
I get it. I understand. Somebody approached me the other day and said, look, I got this airplane. I don't need it anymore. I'm going to cut you a deal you can't refuse. And I'm like, really? How much? Oh, it's like 15 million. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds like a deal I can't pass up. This fucking guy, are you kidding me right now? How is this guy still in ministry? How does he not get canceled?
Well, my question then, okay, all right, but I want to get to the demons because people are very concerned about that comment.
Give me a chance here, Inside Edition. I love your eyes.
Oh, I love your eyes. That's not inappropriate or anything. This guy is a snake.
In 21 days, 70 hours, 40,000 miles, touched 5 continents, and preached face to face personally.
You don't need to do that anymore. There's this thing called technology. People can literally get your messages right on their phone. You're like, oh, hey, what's Kenneth got to say to me today? And you could pop out your phone like this and get the message just like that. You don't need to preach face-to-face anymore, everybody. The game has changed. The fact that these pastors are justifying having to travel all over the world and preaching is bullshit because you can get the message to anybody. Literally, I was in Kenya, in the most remote village in Kenya, and they had internet. They could get your messages right to their phone. You don't need to go there and rip them off. I'm not going to continue on this. We're probably going to do an entire video just on this video alone. And so I just wanted to show you that he can't justify the life that he's living. He can't tell people, well, I have to fly to these places and do this because that's bullshit, okay? So Kenneth Copeland is one of the worst, okay? And then you've got Stephen Furtick, okay, who lives in a 16,000 square foot mansion. And he's been ratioed because of this, because he's not necessarily a wealth and prosperity preacher. He is sort of on the level. But his main crime is the haircut and this look he had before he started juicing. So I know I hit on Stephen Furtick a lot just because it bothers me that you need a 16,000 square foot mansion for 4 people. And it bothers me that these pastors get to live in lavish luxury wealth and lifestyles when probably half their congregation is poor. You cannot justify living the way that you live if anybody that you serve, right? These pastors serve the people, not the other way around, although that's what these churches are about. The people serve them. The pastors are supposed to serve the people, okay? You cannot justify living these lifestyles if any person that you serve is poor, has debt, has need of anything. You cannot justify it. That's what I'm getting at here, okay? Let's talk about some of the major issues that are plaguing some of these pastors, okay? You got Joel Osteen, and the flood that happened in Texas, and people were like, no, he opened up his church. You know what? Joel Osteen opened up the church because he got ratioed online. And his people were like, we got to do this. We got to open up the church. And so he only opened it up after being pressured online. Everybody knows it. And somebody called me out in one of my comments, oh no, you got to be real. You got to be honest about Joel Osteen. He opened up his church. He did. But only after he got pressured to do so, which is so weird to me because like nobody lives there. He could have done it right away and initially and maybe got some goodwill from the people of Miami, okay? He owns a stadium that days earlier could have helped maybe save some lives, and he didn't do it. And so that's one of his major problems. Needless to say, you know, the money and the wealth and everything else, that's another problem. You got Duplantis and the groping, the issue, okay? So we're going to try to open that. Let's see if I can find that. Duplantis has been accused of groping literally in front of his congregation with his secretary. So let's dig into this little video. I'm gonna fast forward it a little bit to one of his messages, okay? This guy's also a snake, and you can tell just by looking at him. But what he's about to do is bring up his secretary. And let's just get into it. I'm gonna walk you through it.
Mary.
By the way, I've never seen this, so I'm watching with you for the first time.
20 years, this is Roy. Roy, would you handle? This is Roy's wife. Come.
This is Roy's wife. Does she have a name? Is she allowed to have a name at your church? Let's hear about it.
Okay. In other words, if you call me and you get a hold of me, you're going to get to Mary. If you get to Mary, you got to...
Thanks, Mary. She has a name. It's not, hey, Roy's wife, can I speak to the pastor, please? Thanks, Mary.
Pretty high on the totem pole.
She does not know this is going down, by the way, I don't think.
Now watch this.
She's pretty high on the totem pole.
Now, Mary worked for, 20 years? You know, and we kind of treat Mary like our daughter, you know. But see, she works for Jesse Duplantis Ministries. This is how God sees me and Mary.
Look at her face. Look at her face.
Why?
Oh, it's so awkward.
Walk with me, Mary. Wherever she goes, I go.
Oh.
Why? It's the way it's supposed to be.
Oh, in front of everybody. I can't watch it. Okay, so this is the groping thing that people were talking about. He's got her hands around her breasts, and she did not expect this. Look at her face on TV. She's on TV. She's in front of the whole congregation. People are laughing. They're getting their phones out. They're recording it. He just embarrassed this lady like, I can't even get into it. That's just a thing. The other video we're going to talk about Jesse Duplantis is one of the craziest, is that he's got this wall of airplanes that he's owned. They all say that their church owns them, but they only fly around the pastors, okay, and their teams. This is insane. No church should have a private airplane. I'm sorry. There's no justification for it. Unless that private airplane is used to get refugees out of countries, is used to bring aid, and maybe it is, but on the same level, it needs to be full-time doing that, right? There needs to be a ministry itself, like there are MAF ministries and people that take planes and they fly aid. These guys are flying them and their Botoxed wives around the world for vacations. That's what they're for. They might justify it by saying, yeah, we do this to do other things, but they don't fly aid and they don't use it for good things, okay? They use it just for themselves. Could you imagine having a multi-million-dollar plane to just fly you around as a pastor? I don't understand how people can justify it, but this is what he's trying to raise money for a new plane. Watch this.
Now, I talk about this in a lot of my messages, and I want you to see this if we can, Caleb. Get it back. This is the very first plane that I purchased for the Lord.
For the Lord. The Lord's like, I didn't ask you to purchase that plane, asshole.
Back in December 1994. And I said where I began. And then the second one,
a ministry placing placards of his success based on his airplanes. A pastor. Don't gloss that over, everybody.
Purchase was in January 2004, where I used to be. The one I'm flying right now, and it's been with me 12 years. I purchased it in January 2006, where I am. Now, I want you to get a shot of this one, Caleb. Now, this is the Star Trek Enterprise. This is where I'm going. Praise God, what I believe in God for.
You believe in God for Star Trek Enterprise, for a space shuttle. This guy, keep believing, bro.
Let me just say this. We're believing God for a brand new Falcon 7X so we can go anywhere in the world one stop. Now, people say, my Lord, can't you go with this one? Yes, but I can't go at one stop. And you see, if I can do it with one stop, I can fly it for a lot cheaper because I have my own fuel farm.
Can't even listen to this asshole. Okay. He's basically saying we need a new airplane because we can go one stop. We don't want to fly two stops because that's for peasants. We want to make sure we can go one stop, so we need this big giant plane to get to where we need to go, to have our vacations, bring our leadership, and do everything we need to do to justify spending all this crazy money. I cannot believe this exists. I can go on and on and on. That's going to be a whole other video. And each of them are going to get their own video, and I will do that because this stuff is really interesting on a psychological level about why these people are able to do this, how they're able to do it, okay? What is the prosperity gospel? I gave you a little thing before, but it's influential pastors who twist the Bible into what they want it to say, basically like any other religion. So they're not free of guilt like any other, like they're all do it. All religions do it, even the church I came from. Everybody twists the gospel to make sense for them. That's why all these types of congregations exist. All these denominations exist because they have their own interpretation of what the Bible says. The Mormons have their own interpretation of what the Bible says, even though they have their own book. You know, Johos, everybody has their own interpretation. That's why there's so many. This is just one more branch of an interpretation of the Bible, which really just boils down to like, how can the Bible be infallible and without error if there's so many people making errors about it and like basing their entire religion on it, right? Maybe it is without error, but we're all just getting it wrong, which is probably likely the answer. And so what they do is their interpretation is that God wants you to be healthy and wealthy, very prosperous, and if you're not, something is wrong. You're living in sin. That's why it's predatory. So it preys on weak-minded people, okay? And it's a justification gospel, meaning like a lot of people who go to these churches want to go there because they want to justify living the way that they live, right? So they're saying, I'm wealthy, but I know that it's wrong. And people who need to justify something by doing the thing that they need to justify know on the level, on the most basic psychological level, that what they're doing is probably not right, okay? I'm not saying that being wealthy is wrong. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that if you're a follower of Jesus and you are uber wealthy and you're not doing anything to help those people that Jesus called us to help, then you're doing it wrong. Okay, I would love to be wealthy, and if I was, I'd be very generous. And I know a lot of very wealthy people who are very generous with their money for the Lord. So I know people who have millions who gave most of it away in the service of the Lord. And I'm saying like a lot. But I'm just saying, a lot of these people go to these churches because they want to justify their wealth by saying, I want to be a Christian, because they also want to have that like heaven insurance. They want to say, well, I'm going here, I'm listening to what I need to, I'm a follower of Jesus, blah, blah, I'm really rich. But if I listen to this gospel, that means that I'm justifying and I'll be getting to heaven. But in the end, it's pretty shaky ground they're standing on. So they're trying to use it as like a lot of rich people, is insurance. And it's the most bogus insurance you'll ever buy. Okay? It makes the leadership of the churches rich while everybody else gets suckered into giving them money. They're not making the money. Like the people where they're saying, give us money so that you get money. Look, what they're basing this on is, and I talked about this in my tithing video, which you can watch here. Okay? They're saying that if you tithe, you get blessed. And it's true, you do. Here's the problem. You're tithing to these guys, their pockets, not to God, not to Jesus, because a lot of these churches don't do much, okay? If you have private wealth, if you have jets and everything else, and I'm sure that these churches are giving to their communities and helping around the world. I'm not saying that they're not. I'm sure that they are, but they could be doing more. Instead of buying $15 million jets, imagine how far 15 million goes. I know at my ex-church, I got super pissed because they're building $250,000 playground. Imagine how far that $250,000 playground goes, right? That money. But these people we're talking 15s, 20s, millions dollar private jets. What good they could do with that money instead of trying to upgrade the jet so they can fly one stop. So I just Googled quickly where they get their biblical justification for this. And here's what they came. I'm going to read a bunch of these to you, okay? So and they're just like cliff notes, okay? So Psalm 35:27 says, God has pleasure in the prosperity of his servant, okay? And again, most of these are going to be taken out of context, and I cannot dig into the context of all of them, okay? The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, which doesn't necessarily mean money. And that's Proverbs 10:22. God is not selfish or stingy, but gives richly of all things to enjoy. 1 Timothy 6:17. The earth is full of goodness of the Lord. Why did God create such an abundance and give it to us unless it's his will for us to have it? Okay, that's what their justification is. Why would he create all this wealth and all this stuff and we're not supposed to have it? That's what they're justifying. Christians are joint heirs with Christ. We are heirs of Christ, okay? Meaning that we should be living like that, which is, look, again, I'm not against wealth. And we're not going to, and so what they do is I'm not going to read all these, but there's so many ways that they can justify this and take it out of context, right? And there's so many. Look, the argument here is not that God does not want people to be wealthy, because that's just not true. If you're wealthy, you have a responsibility, if you're a Christian anyway and wealthy, your responsibility is to use that wealth for the kingdom of God. Anything you do if you're a Christian needs to be for the furtherance of the kingdom of God if you believe that. People who are not believers, don't listen to that. It doesn't matter to you. If you're a believer and wealthy and you're not using your wealth and prosperity to further the kingdom of God by helping the poor, clothe, feed, and everything else and do everything you're supposed to do, then that's where the problem lies. So what we're missing here is that servants and pastors of God's word need to do this thing called living above reproach. When I was a pastor, okay, how I live matters. And a lot of it's surface because you're just trying to look optically above reproach, which means sometimes you actually are living above reproach. And the whole point of being a pastor is that, look, you literally need to live a life that looks like you're a pastor, and for good or bad, right? So again, if you're driving Lexuses, if you're driving expensive cars, have expensive houses and going on lavish vacations and have all these things, you're not living above the reproach. I'm not saying you need to live like a pauper either. I'm not saying you need to be poor. That's not the case. I'm just saying that if there are people that you serve as a pastor who are struggling, but you're not, something is missing. Let's go back to living above reproach. So meaning how you live matters. If you're uber wealthy with enough money to help and don't, you're wrong, okay? Living above reproach, meaning you don't go out for dinner with ladies, you don't have any look of impropriety about cheating on your wife, nothing like that. There's no phone calls or text messages or anything like that. You just live literally above it all so that you cannot be accused or blamed. That's basically what it's for. It's about optics. But in the end, it really does help as a pastor to be held accountable to these optics, right? Because then you are trying to live a nice life and you're trying not to hurt people around you, cheat on your wife, and do all those crazy things that a lot of pastors do, right? Again, I'm going to say this. There's nothing wrong with being wealthy, but when it's because you're using a platform of being a man of God to become wealthy, therein lies the rub. So this is why most of the world thinks that these prosperity pastors and gospels is utter bullshit. There's so many articles written about it. There's movies made about it. There's YouTube channels galore about all this stuff, and they continue to do it, okay? The issue is, and this is how I'm going to explain it to you like you're 5 years old. If you claim to be a man or woman of God, okay, and you get up and preach, and your platform is now used to create your wealth, you are literally using the platform of God to create wealth for yourself. It becomes your business. It becomes your language of business. It becomes everything that you do. And a lot of pastors are like, oh, it's all my book sales. Again, we're going to go back to this. Your book sales are sold to the people in your congregation who then buy it for other people, who then spread the word and become New York Times bestsellers, who get into the bookstores. You're using your church for a marketing platform for your books. That's just as bad as someone putting a tithe money into the plate and you putting it in your pocket. Okay? You're using a platform of I am a speaker for God, for Jesus, where I'm up here telling you about Jesus, but I'm wearing $1,000 sneakers. I'm wearing a $15,000 watch. I fly in a $15 million airplane to travel and bring the gospel to the rest of the world when I don't need to do that anymore. When technology exists where I can literally, real time, pop on my camera, on my phone, and preach the gospel to you right at the moment you need to hear it. Okay? In a world where we live like technology, you cannot justify airplanes. I'm saying that if you're a man or woman of God preaching the gospel, you cannot live like this. There's nothing wrong with being wealthy and sharing your wealth. I'm just saying, there's a lot of pastors out there that in paying people for their time and doing the things, but there's got to be, if you want to get into semantics, there needs to be like a level where you're like, at this point, I can't spend any more of this money. I'm going to give the rest of it away. I'm going to live comfortably here, which is okay. And I'm going to help everybody that I serve to come up to my level, or to at least help people pay debts, to help people with groceries. And I'm sure some of these churches do that, okay? But not enough, because there's too many people in the church living in poverty and on food stamps that's just, you cannot ignore it, okay? They're fleecing these people. And then this is a huge problem in Africa right now, where these pastors are going, because they know that one of the richest wealth and prosperity pastors, I forget the guy's name, Oluwango or something like that, is in Africa. Most of these pastors are going to Africa because this is where most of their wealth is coming from. Africans specifically are the ones being fleeced the most in this ministry. It's not even Americans. Like it's like a minuscule amount based on what's happening in the continent of Africa, okay? Because they're so poor. And what they're doing is telling these poor people that if you follow this gospel, you'll be rich. It's a get rich quick scheme like MLMs. It's the same thing that's happening. So it's basically just this lie that these pastors and these snake oil salesmen are telling you to say, look, if you do this, if you live this life, you're going to be wealthy just like me. It's literally a get rich quick scheme that works for nobody, okay? I'm going to be honest with you guys about something. And this is going to be, whatever. I'm sure some people will take this video and be like, look, he's this. But I have to be honest with you about this. I'm going to talk to you about my influence that I had at my small church. So these guys have 15,000, 20,000 member churches. They're on TV in front of millions of people. They have a way bigger platform than I will ever have, okay? But I want to talk to you about my tiny bit of influence that I had in my town as a worship pastor and what it did to my heart and my head. I was at the church that was the church, okay? It was the one that was doing all the popular music. We had all the amazing programs. Our Christmas specials were like out of this world, incredible. We had at the movie series, we had this amazing playground. We have all these crazy things. It was the church to be at. But specifically for me, what I did when I came in was I started launching the Sunday morning experience the way that I thought the big churches were doing it. I would copy them and we would do it. And we became that place here. And I will be completely honest with you, and this might be so dumb for me to say this, but it was going to my head. I really sometimes wrestled with the fact that, is this a show? Is this a show? Because I would get those anonymous letters under my door saying, we don't like the performance of this, and you're just performing, and blah, 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 blah. And I would sometimes often wrestle with, am I performing? Is my influence, am I doing this for the influence that I'm gaining? Am I doing this for the pats in the back, the hugs, the look from women? Am I doing this for myself, for selfish reasons? And sometimes, as a human being, the answer is yes. The answer is I'm going to do this thing because I know that person's looking at me. Or I'm going to do this thing because I know it's going to get people to like me more. And I wrestled with that, and every pastor wrestles with that. But in the end, I decided that I'm never going to get up on that stage without being pure of my heart. Or before I get up there and play any string, any song, or sing anything, that I made it my personal responsibility to, before I get up there, to wipe all that stuff clean before I got down there. And I took my responsibility very seriously. But it doesn't negate that on the side of everything that's happening, that I was becoming influential, that people would write me letters, that again, women would stare at me a certain way or openly flirt with me, that my peers and people, musicians of my community, were looking up to me for my advice and how do you do that? And I was the rock star in the area. So, and the YouTube thing is the same thing. You get this influence and it really hits you. What I'm trying to tell you here is that nobody can just get around it. It's almost impossible. I'm sure some can, but it's very rare. So imagine this tiny place that I'm at, expand that by millions upon millions of people, women, men, planes, money, and the power and wealth that you get. It is impossible to not let that affect you. And so I have to sit back and I have to remind myself every day that I have a platform that I can use for good, which I'm hoping that I'm doing right here. I say all that to say there's no way these pastors are doing this properly or right. There's just no, it's literally, I'm telling you, it's literally impossible. Okay, and this happens when Bill Hybels and all these major pastors fall down because the years and years of living like this. Look at friggin' Jerry Falwell Jr. and their marriage and everything else. What happens when wealth and privilege become everything to you and you have more money than you can ever spend and you can do everything else? It's about what's next. And I talk about this a lot when you're wealthy. That's why Jeffrey Epstein exists. When you're wealthy and you can have everything you want, any woman you want, right? Any man you want, any type of sexual, whatever, any type of sexual adventure you want, you can have it. When you're wealthy, and when you exasperate all that, you end up starting to take things that you cannot have, which is why Epstein exists, okay? Which is why this whole ring of Save the Children exists. These pastors live exorbitantly wealthy lifestyles that they literally, and I'll say this again, they cannot spend their wealth. It is impossible for them to spend all their wealth. And so what they do is they end up getting into craziness. Look at Ted Haggart, and that's another video for another day. But you get all these pastors who eventually start falling, and that is what is happening right now. But for some reason, these snakes get away with it. They aren't really falling. Some of them are, but these guys are not falling. And so I don't know what's happening, but if we have to continue to call this out. So I was brutally honest with you there about my time at that church, and some people are going to be like, well, see there, you shouldn't have been a pastor to begin with, right? I'm brutally honest with you about that. But that was only a partly how I thought and believed. Okay, that was not what took over me all the time. I wrestled with it. And so I tell you the truth because I know that every pastor wrestles with that. Every single one. When you're in a public platform, people just want to be around you. They want to be a part of your circle. They want to say that you're a friend, whatever it is. And this happened to me a lot. And again, that's why I was so pissed that when I left, I all of a sudden didn't have any friends because no longer am I this influential pastor in this community. All of a sudden people aren't hanging out with me, calling me anymore and stuff like that. And so it really was this surface level thing. I say this to say that I hope that some pastors can do it without getting there, but and I'm sure some do, but in a mega church situation where you're powerful, influential, and wealthy, impossible is what I'm telling you, because even I, on a tiny level, struggle with it a little bit, and these guys are multiples of millions bigger than I ever was, okay? So that's why I tell you to be brutally honest. Whatever that's going to happen, if I can't be honest with you, then I shouldn't be talking. So being honest with your struggles, and that also is not a defense of these pastors, but it is a reality of the lives that they live. I wouldn't be surprised if half of them have open marriages and don't talk about it because they just need to relieve this, like I can have everything I want. And for a lot of these pastors, that means sexual impropriety. Okay, it really just does. It really means that. And there's too many to name that this has happened to, because women in general want to be around these guys, and these guys they might not be getting the thing that they get at home, and then all of a sudden these women are showing them attention and all that stuff, and that's kind of why it's really hard to fall. And that's why you need to live above reproach. Never go out, never be alone with a woman and all that stuff. It's just really, really dangerous. So I hope my honesty didn't just like throw me under the bus. And again, everybody can be hypocritical, and I can too. But I really want to stress this. I made it a really important factor of my life that before I ever stepped up on a stage, that I checked my heart before I went up. And I think a lot of these pastors do that too. Maybe even these guys do, because they got to justify it somehow. And maybe they truly believe what they're saying. But I don't believe that. But maybe some of them do. But I checked my heart before I got up there. But it cannot be ignored that influence, wealth, and attention is a bad thing, especially for men and women of God. Okay? So according to Kate Ballard of Vox, some believers in the prosperity of gospel seek wealth, but others seek reassurance. So it's true that the prosperity gospel encourages people, especially its leaders, to revel in private jets and multi-million-dollar homes as evidence of God's love. But among the less well-heeled believers, I sensed a different kind of yearning, one that wasn't entirely materialistic. Believers of these churches want an escape from poverty, from their failing health, and feeling that their lives are leaky buckets. She has a really good point here. A lot of these people go to this church because they want to feel like, I need to feel good. And so there's nothing wrong with that either. They want to just come to a Joel Osteen message and feel good when they walk out. They want to be like, I feel good after hearing that. I feel like I'm not a waste and total waste. So some of these things are okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it's disguised as this snake oil salesman taking your money, that's where I have a problem with it. Make people feel good. That's a really good thing. But don't fleece them. If you want to make people feel good about the gospel and who they are or whatever, fine. But just don't charge them for it. Okay, that's where I get it. If you're poor, then you lack faith. If you're unhealthy, you lack faith. You're not praying enough. You're not doing something right. So f them for saying that and putting that on their congregants. This is the dangerous part here. This is the one that gets me the most, is that they preach this gospel, and if you're not living the way that they're living, they're like, well, here's your problem. Why aren't you praying enough? If you just prayed into existence, it'll happen. What is your problem? The problem lies with you, not this. The pastor, it lies with this guy, truly. But they're putting that on the people, and the judgment is put on them to say, well, I'm clearly not doing something right. I'm not doing something right. I'm not doing something. And you're following this gospel and this truth, and you think it's your fault. It's just not the case. And I can't even get into that here. There's so much nuance to it about living, how some people are dealt a certain set of deck of cards and their life is garbage. Like my mom had one of the worst deck of cards ever dealt to her in her life. Okay, one of the worst I've ever seen in my life. I remember I told you about the time when my mom tried to jump off a balcony and I had to hold her from jumping off a balcony. My mom and I and my sister and everybody in my family were dealt one of the shittiest deck of cards you could ever be dealt in life. Did I blame God? Yep. Did my mom blame God? Yep. How can a God who loves his children do this to the people? That's another video on another day, but here's the basis of it all. The world is inherently evil. God isn't going to step in. We have free will to do what we want to do. Even though I did blame God, and for a lot of that, and my mom did too, in the end, we came to a realization that it's just not the case. God doesn't necessarily want us to be super wealthy and have private jets and everything. He doesn't not want it for us. He doesn't want us to be poor and hurting either, right? But when you come into a flock, a proper community of believers, everything can change for you. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a ton of money, but if you actually follow the faith the way God, Jesus intended to follow the faith by loving others, only thing that's going to come back into your life is love and blessing. And that's not wealth necessarily, okay? It could be that, but it's not necessarily what it means. And so when I matured in my faith, I realized it wasn't God to blame, that inherently the world is evil. And all these things exist, like these pastors that are evil, that tell us that what we're doing is evil, okay? That was probably a little bit confusing, but a lot of people blame God for things that go on. Why is there hurricanes? A lot of people can't believe in God because of the way the world is, and I don't blame you. I don't necessarily have the answer, but the answer to me has always been it's free. We have free will as humans. What we do with that free will is important. If we didn't have free will, what would be the point? Here's an example. You've got a crush, but you have a superpower, okay? Your superpower allows you to make people love you. In the end, you can use that superpower, but I think in the end, would you really want to use that superpower, or would you want that person to love you by who you are and not force them to love you? It's a weird question because some people would use that power and be like, I love to be loved, but it's not real. The point of free will is that love needs to be given freely. And I need to follow Jesus on my own accord and not be forced to do it. And so that's why evil exists in the world, so that we can choose the other path. Free will is us saying, I'm choosing this path to love you. God could just literally snap his finger, everybody loves me and obeys everything I want. He could do that. He doesn't, because it needs to be genuine. I don't know if that helps you. Sometimes that makes it more confusing and convoluted for other people, but that's what faith is for. That is what free will is about. And we live in a world of free will. Why is it so popular? I know I'm getting long. Sorry, guys. You guys like the long videos. It doesn't matter. It's so popular because it's telling God what to do, not the other way around. We're telling God we want this. God, bless us, and we want this, and if we just yell it out, if we just claim it and take it, it's ours. We're saying, God, I want that, and you give it to me. Like, we're going to cover the Wake Up Olive story from Bethel. That's one of those really, really crazy stories where they're like, God is going to raise this little girl from the dead. Okay, we want this. We want the riches. We want the airplanes. We want that. We're telling God what we want, not the other way around. That's why it's so attractive, because we get to be the ones in power. Okay, scores of easily influenced people flock to this for promises of wealth. Okay, it's like an MLM. They come to these churches because they're like, okay, if I just subscribe to this ideology, I will become wealthy. Or if I get into these networks of people, I will become wealthy. And sometimes it works. To boil it down, it's a get-rich-quick scheme. It's an MLM. It's a multi-level marketing scheme. You come in because you're like, I want this. And these guys are praying it. These guys are preaching it, praying it, and claiming it. And well, look at him. He has a yacht. He has a plane. He has a $10 million mansion. He's got houses and all this stuff. Clearly, it's working for him. I want that. The world is literally, YouTube and the internet is just populated with these types of guys who are like, do you want to get wealthy in 30 days? Do you want to make money like this? Boom, boom. You want to do this? Here's how you do what I did, right? It's populated with it. And those guys make money on those other people. It's because people don't want to work hard to get rich. I was this person growing up, and that's why I fell for MLMs. That's why MLMs are so popular, because it's like this promise of wealth for not doing a lot. That's what these churches are about. We're going to talk about MLMs someday. I hate MLMs. Okay? People want to be justified in living lavishly so they can flock to the godless church in order to feel good about their privilege. Okay? So on the whole, it's funny because deep down they know optics matter. I talked about this a little bit before. They go to these churches to justify their lifestyles. So the ones who are rich go there, so when their friends and family and people call them out on it, like, how can you justify being a Christian, but you live like this? Well, I go to Joel Osteen's church, and this is what he says about it. This is the gospel. This is what the gospel tells us we should have. In the end, guys, it's about what Jesus told us to do. People are arguing about socialism. Would Jesus be a socialist? And the argument to be made is, look, Jesus told that guy, he's like, this guy came up to Jesus and said, look, Jesus, how do I become like a diehard follower of you? What do I need to do to be like the person that you're telling me I need to do? And you know what Jesus said is like, you're not gonna like this answer. Sell everything you own. It's like walking up to Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos comes up to Jesus and says, Jesus, what do I have to do to be a true follower of you? And Jesus says, sell everything you have and give it to the poor, then follow me. Who is going to do that? Who, even of you watching this, who might not have any wealth, who might have a little bit of something. If Jesus told that to you, what would you do? Right? I wouldn't be able to. I'm just as bad. What I'm saying is that in order to actually do the things that Jesus did, this is more indicative of anything else in the Bible where Jesus says, sell everything, give it to the poor, come follow me. That is opposite of what these guys are preaching. And so people are like, would Jesus be a socialist? Here's the argument to be made. Socialism says we're going to take from all the wealthy people and give it to the poor. So as a whole, as a socialist, as a person, it's different because you're taking something that doesn't belong to you. Jesus wants you to give it up of your own free will and give it to the poor. So socialism is not a Jesus attribute. I mean, on the level of like helping the poor, it is, but at the same time, if you're taking from people and giving to others, it's not what Jesus was saying either. I believe Jesus would just have been a person that said, do what you're going to do. But if you want to hear the answer, here's the answer. He would never condemn people. He would never condemn gay people, transgender people, people who are poor, people who are rich. He would just say, look, if you want the answer, here's my answer. You might not like it, but here it is. So therein lies the rub. A lot of people are saying that this is the way that we should be living. We should be giving everything away. Should be wealth disparaged to 1%, blah, blah, blah. That's a whole indicative of the world. And these churches are not helping. Okay? So go back to my don't tithe the mega churches because they don't need your money anymore. If you're buying $16 million airplanes, leave that church. If your pastor lives in a $10 million mansion, leave that church, okay? Get away from that as fast as possible. Start tithing to small churches, missionaries, okay? Start putting your money elsewhere. These churches do not need your money, okay? So what can you do? Stop going to these churches. Stop watching their videos. Stop spreading their message of lies to the world and saying this is the gospel. It really isn't. Maybe some things that they speak are biblical truth on some levels, but you have to take everything into consideration. If your pastor lives in absolute luxury and wealth, but there are people he serves that are poor, wrong. Not justifiable. Can a pastor be wealthy? Yes. Okay? But not at the expense of a gospel. It's a really, really fine line. If your pastor is using his platform to preach about God but making money at it, that is wrong. I mean, wealth, not money. You should be paying your pastors what they're owed. And I do feel pastors should be living comfortably, should be paying them what they're worth, should making sure they have no worries and have a good retirement. So when they stop, because they're going to be drained spiritually, mentally, exhausted by the end of their tenure as a pastor who's given their life to the gospel, they should be living comfortably later on. I believe that. And some of you don't. Some of you believe that you should just doing by just giving that freely. And that's true too. Some people do that. I'm just saying there's a fine line to be had here. That pastor who's saying, well, I sell my books, I make my money, and I don't take a salary. It doesn't matter. You're still using your platform as a man of God or a woman of God to make tons and tons of wealth. Okay? You get into Joyce Meyer and things like that where there's a convoluted Joyce Meyer, Stephen Furtick, Houston from Hillsong, and you got Bethel and all these churches who look on the surface like they're not wealth and prosperity, but it cannot be argued how many millions they make. Okay, churches should not have so much money that they have to spend it on absorbent things like giant buildings and tech and touring bands. They should, if you have a ton of money as a church and you have the ability to literally lift your whole community out of poverty Shouldn't you do that instead? Wouldn't your money be best served there? Like some of these churches could literally take their small communities and the money that they bring in, like Redding, California, okay, where Bethel is. They make so much money and they could literally lift their entire city out of poverty if they wanted to. But they won't, right? They won't. Kenneth Copeland, Joel Osteen, all these people could literally lift millions of people out of poverty, pay off debts for people, do all these things, but they won't, right? They need their jets. They need to live their lifestyle. They can't justify, like if you have all this wealth, well, why don't they ever talk about being generous with their wealth? But they only talk about being generous with wealth to me. Give me your generous wealth. So, this video can go so many more ways, and I think we're going to continue to cover it. But guys, don't let these snakes infiltrate your brain. Be smart, because they rely on dumb people to believe this bullshit. The same as MLMs do, okay? They rely and they're predatory to people who are just, maybe not dumb, dumb's the wrong word, but very easily manipulated. There are so many people who are easily manipulated. Some of the biggest cults in the world, like Scientology and like all these things, are just, they just grab easily manipulated people and put them in their ranks. That's how this works. We're going to dig right into, maybe next week, the wealth of churches like Mormons and Johos and all this stuff, and where the wealth goes and how much money churches are actually bringing in. I don't know. Let's see. I always say something and I usually do something else. But this one was an eye-opener even for me as I was doing some more research on this stuff. But I want to dig into the churches that live on the fringes of wealth and prosperity, who don't necessarily say they are. Like Hillsong says they're not a wealth and prosperity church. Bethel would say the same thing. You know, Elevation says they're not, but they are. So we're going to dig into those ones that live in the fringes, who live in the gray area, and we're going to talk about wealth upon wealth of these churches and how they do it, what they do with their money, and how they hide it. So, stay tuned for that. Guys, like and subscribe, or don't. I don't care. You can hit the bell if you want to get a notification when my next video comes out. You know, I love that you guys are here to listen, and I hope that good things happen to you. I'm trying to end all my videos on something super positive. So today, I hope your roast comes out just perfect. That your family is just like, hey, do you know that you're awesome because you work really hard? I hope that your husband gives you a kiss on his way out the door, and that your wife gives you a nap in a BJ someday. I hope that everything goes well for you, and that your week is just positive, and all the things that you're striving for this week and the goals that you're trying to hit are hit. I hope that you make plans and that those plans come to fruition. I hope that you pass on good things to people who need it. If you see someone on the road today who needs $5 for a meal, buy him a meal, okay? Pass on the good stuff, okay? Be good to people around you, and pass on this message to people that need to hear it. It's not a very big message of hope, to be honest with you, but there's hope to be had here when people are starting to call out these people and these preachers are starting to fall down. And never forget that Kenneth Copeland is one of the biggest snakes, and if you look into his eyes and you don't see the devil, you're not looking close enough. We'll see you next time.